All right, welcome to this quick recap of the Thursday night football game between the Chiefs and the Ravens. Football is back for real now, especially in NFL terms. Super excited about that, and I hope you enjoyed the game. Just want to go through some thoughts about the game really quick here. We'll start off at the top. Thought both teams came out striking quick. Ravens went down, scored a touchdown pretty quick, and the Chiefs made a quick response. Both decent length drives, but also not a ton of time taken. Both pretty smooth down the field, and the game really started in the same way that the AFC Championship matchup between these two teams went down. In both games, the Ravens and Chiefs both started hot in the first quarter and scored on their first drive. One thing I noticed for both teams, but especially the Ravens, they both seem to be having a little bit of offensive line trouble in the first game of the season, which isn't unexpected necessarily, especially these days with the shortened preseason. A lot of offenses, and especially the offensive line, especially when you have a lot of new pieces on that line, are going to take some time to gel and get into a rhythm, and we especially saw that with the Ravens. Saw also that the referees are definitely not letting off on how they are calling illegal formations, specifically when it comes to the left tackles. We saw this become an issue week 1 of last season, as a matter of fact, when the referees started calling it very strongly against the Chiefs last year against the Lions, where if either of your tackles are not lined up to where they pretty much need to be lined up alongside the guard at this point. They can't be as far back as we might see it in some plays in the past at multiple levels of football, where you've got your center right at the line, of course, then you got the guards slightly back from that, and then the tackles slightly back from that. Basically, they want to have the tackles be lined up to the point where the crown of the helmet for the tackle needs to be across the line of where the center's belt is, pretty much. And so when you see it on camera angles, it's easier to see, but sometimes the calls can be a little bit tic-tacky. Sometimes it gets called, sometimes it doesn't. But the referees came out this game and showed very much that yet again this season they're still planning on enforcing that, so teams are going to have to be careful. And unfortunately for the Ravens, that ended up hurting them a few times in this game, getting some illegal formation penalties. They also had some other issues with substitutions and other things like that. Again, the Chiefs weren't perfect there either, but another thing for the Ravens on that side is they also just had a lot of play calling, especially in the first half of the game. It very much felt obvious that the Ravens seemed to be calling plays specifically to play around their offensive line, as if they weren't very trusting of the offensive line's ability to hold up. And to be fair, especially as we got into the game, there were quite a few passing plays where the offensive line of the Ravens held up just fine enough and gave Lamar Jackson plenty of time, in my opinion. So I don't think their offensive line is by any means going to be horrible this season. And again, this is week 1. I'm sure it'll get much better, but at least towards the beginning of the game, that was a bit of a concern because it kind of limited the types of plays that the Ravens were able to go with. They were having to go with a lot of quick plays. They were obviously doing a lot of things they would do anyways, but at least early on in the game, it really seemed to limit their ability to give Lamar time to throw and get big plays open. The game did get off to a quick start, both teams scoring a touchdown in the first quarter, then both teams exchanging a few field goals in the second quarter going into half. I thought at the end of the first half, the Ravens seemed to be a little bit too willing to let the clock bleed out on their last possession. They had some timeouts left. They had all 3 timeouts on their final possession, and they were really conservative on when to start using that first timeout, really up until the very end. And there were just a couple plays where it seemed like they let too much time run off the clock. And even Mike Tirico on the broadcast mentioned that it seemed like there were a couple of those plays where you might have expected the Ravens to go ahead and use a timeout there just to save extra time. Of course, it's understandable the Ravens also didn't want to save too much time, didn't want to end up giving the ball back to the Chiefs with time to go, but really what ended up happening was they ended up having so little time once they did get into the red zone and had used those 3 timeouts. They had, again, earlier let, say, 20 seconds run off the clock, and in the end, they ended up getting down to the red zone, only having enough time to eventually have to just kick a field goal rather than maybe have an extra play or two to go for the end zone. Midway through the game as well, one area that obviously people are going to talk about because nobody loves when the referees seem to give a unfair advantage to the Chiefs. I'm not about propagating that that's what they're purposely trying to do. This is week 1, first regular season game for these referees as well, just as it is for the teams. But certainly doesn't excuse the mistake they made, no matter what team they did it for. But anyways, earlier on in the game, in the first half, on that last drive, the Chiefs ended up having to call a timeout because they were misaligned, didn't have the right personnel out. But the problem is it was actually Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs' defensive coordinator, and that's against the rules. It can only be the head coach or someone on the field. Those are generally going to be the two that have to call the timeout. It can't be an assistant coach. And so technically, the referees should not have awarded the Chiefs that timeout. And even if they had, what they generally are supposed to do is award the timeout, but then penalize the team that called that timeout. So really, what the referees should have done is given the timeout to the Chiefs, and then as a part of the timeout, tacked on a yardage penalty or whatever with that. Likely would have been half the distance to the goal and a first down maybe for the Ravens, something like that. But there should have been a penalty attached to the timeout that was awarded to the Chiefs because it was called in an illegal manner. But that was missed by the referees. They awarded the touchdown to the Chiefs and didn't give any penalties or anything like that. So certainly for Ravens fans, I'm sure that's a part of the game that may be a sticking point to blame for the loss. But then moving into the final drive of the game, scores 27-20. Ravens drive down the field. And then we get to 43 seconds left on the clock. It's first and 10 at the Kansas City 48. Lamar Jackson has a deep pass down to the right side to Rashad Bateman. Bateman makes a really great throw. The pass was a bit high. Bateman makes a good play, jumps up, turns around in the air, and catches just the very bottom tip of the ball and is able to bring it in. And that goes for a good 38-yard completion, getting them to the Kansas City 10. But then on first and goal from the 10, Lamar Jackson's first pass there in the red zone goes incomplete, throws it high, sails it over Isaiah Likely, who's going across the end zone, the back of the end zone towards the left. And on the replay, you could see, and Chris Collinsworth pointed this out, Isaiah Likely had plenty of room to go still towards the pylon. If Lamar had just thrown the ball slightly lower and more to the left, Isaiah Likely, likely, no pun intended, would have had a better chance of actually catching the ball and getting a touchdown. Instead, it sails out of the reach of Isaiah Likely. He also ends up going down to the ground somewhat awkwardly, ended up causing an injury timeout. I don't know what exactly ended up happening. I don't know. It kind of looked to me, at least, like the wind might have just gotten knocked out of Likely. He didn't miss much more than, I think, just one play because of it, but nonetheless, an overthrown ball from Lamar Jackson on the run there. And then on second and 10, you get another incomplete pass. Lamar scrambling just outside to the right side of the pocket, finds Zay Flowers going across the end zone, but just doesn't get the pass right. And at first, I thought it might have been to do with a Chiefs defensive lineman that was coming up somewhat towards Lamar's face and was getting a hand up. I kind of thought that was why the pass looked overthrown at first. But then on watching it again, if you look at the end zone angle of it, really it seems to have been a miscommunication between Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers, just misreading each other's body language as Zay Flowers kind of cut back one way as Lamar Jackson scrambled out. And the pass not only was high, but it was also behind where Zay Flowers was running. And so that goes incomplete. And then we have third and goal from the 10 with 5 seconds left to go. Final play left. No timeouts available to the Ravens. And Lamar on this one runs around, buys some time. We have another scramble drill, and this time we end up having Isaiah Likely back in the game after missing the previous play, going across the end zone, and Lamar throws a decent pass this time, still somewhat high, but more than a catchable ball, and this is where the Ravens just ended up getting a bit unlucky. Isaiah Likely comes down with the ball, appears to have both feet in bounds, and on the replay, it gets called a touchdown, and then the touchdown play didn't end up getting reviewed, and the unlucky part for the Ravens is that on review, if you look at the clip, which I'm showing for you here, at least a screenshot of it, the Ravens lose literally by a toe or by an inch. So when we say football can be won or lost by an inch, it's a game of inches. This game took that literally. This game ended with the Ravens losing because the final play of the game, the receiver, that being tight end Isaiah Likely, comes down in the end zone, both feet seemingly in bounds, but one toe just barely goes over onto the white, effectively being out of bounds, and therefore the game ends with the Chiefs finishing getting the win 27-20 could be a very impactful win to start the season. This is a win that could end up making a difference in playoff seeding at the end of the season. Both of these teams, I'm sure we'll see both of them in the playoffs. Obviously, I predicted both of them to be going there. I certainly expect both of these teams to be two of the best teams in the league, if not at least the top two in the AFC, really. But yeah, just a really unfortunate turn of events for the Ravens. Thank you for watching this video. Enjoy Friday Night Football, first Friday night of the NFL down there in Brazil. We've got the Eagles and the Packers. I'll have a quick reaction up for that tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.